The sound cut through the mansion like a crack in glass, thin and trembling, the kind of cry that carried more weight than anger ever could. It came from a forgotten hallway, from a place no one important ever walked, and yet it stopped Jonathan Hale mid-step, a man who commanded boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, frozen by the ache of a child's heartbreak. That single moment, unnoticed by the world, was about to change lives in a house built on silence and power. If you believe that kindness can rewrite destinies and that second chances still exist in this world, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. Jonathan Hale was known across the United States as a ruthless, brilliant CEO whose success had been carved out of sleepless nights and ruthless decisions. His glass and steel empire rose above New York's skyline like a monument to ambition, and his private residence in Connecticut reflected the same cold perfection. Every room was immaculate, every surface polished, and every person who worked there understood one rule above all others: do your job quietly and do not exist beyond it. Jonathan believed emotions were liabilities, memories distractions, and compassion a weakness he could not afford. His life had been built by cutting away anything that slowed him down, including the parts of himself that once dreamed of warmth. Ruth Alvarez had cleaned that house for 6 years, arriving before dawn and leaving after dusk, her presence blending into the walls like dust wiped away before it could be noticed. She was a single mother who carried exhaustion like a second skin, working 2 jobs to keep her daughter safe in a world that had already taken too much from her. Clara, her 7-year-old daughter, stayed with her on weekends when Ruth could not afford childcare, sitting quietly in the servants' quarters with coloring books and an old stuffed rabbit missing one eye. Ruth taught her to be invisible, not because she wanted to, but because invisibility felt safer than being seen. That afternoon, Ruth had stepped into the laundry room, leaving Clara alone for just a moment. The mansion was unusually busy, filled with the echoes of executives touring the house with Jonathan, discussing acquisitions and future expansions. Clara wandered a few steps too far, drawn by the sunlight spilling through a tall window, and tripped over a loose edge of carpet. The fall was small, but the damage was not. Her stuffed rabbit, the last gift from her late father, tore along its fragile seam. The sound that followed was not loud, but it was raw, a soft sob that carried years of loss and confusion in its fragile breath. Jonathan heard it as he passed the hallway, the noise piercing through his rehearsed indifference. He told himself to keep walking, to let someone else handle it, but something rooted him to the spot. The cry reminded him of a time long buried, of a boy sitting alone in a small Ohio apartment after his mother's funeral, holding a broken toy car and realizing the world would never be gentle again. He had spent decades outrunning that memory, yet here it was, standing in his home, asking to be acknowledged. He followed the sound and saw Clara sitting on the floor, clutching the torn rabbit to her chest, her shoulders shaking as she cried silently. The sight was Southwest out of place in his perfectly ordered world that it felt like an intrusion of truth. Ruth rushed in moments later, panic flooding her face as she realized where her daughter was, fear tightening her posture as she noticed Jonathan standing there. She expected anger, reprimand, maybe even termination. Instead, Jonathan simply stood, staring at the child as if seeing something he had forgotten how to recognize. He asked Ruth to leave them alone for a moment, a request that sent shockwaves through the household once word spread. No one had ever been asked to step away from the CEO's presence with anything less than urgency. Ruth obeyed, her heart pounding as she retreated, convinced her job was already lost. Jonathan knelt down, an act that would later be whispered about among staff like a myth, and examined the torn toy. He did not speak, but his hands trembled as he realized how much pain could be carried by something so small. That evening, Jonathan canceled his meetings, dismissed his guests, and retreated to his study. The house buzzed with confusion as rumors spread of the maid's daughter and the broken toy that had halted the unstoppable Jonathan Hale. Staff watched as he emerged hours later with a decision that would ripple far beyond the mansion's walls. He ordered a full investigation into Ruth's life, not to exploit it, but to understand it. What he found shattered the illusions he had built about merit and fairness. Ruth had lost her husband to a factory accident, buried under debt and denied compensation. Clara had grown up learning to shrink herself to survive. Jonathan's response shocked everyone. He established a trust fund for Clara's education, ensuring she would never have to choose between survival and dreams. He rehired Ruth not as a maid, but as the head of a new foundation he created overnight, one focused on supporting families affected by corporate negligence. He funded therapy programs, scholarships, and safety reforms, using the very wealth he once guarded to dismantle the injustices he had ignored. The household watched in disbelief as the man they feared transformed into someone they barely recognized. The biggest shock came when Jonathan moved Ruth and Clara into the main house, not as servants, but as residents. He converted a wing into a warm, sunlit living space filled with books, art, and laughter, something the mansion had never known. He repaired Clara's stuffed rabbit himself, sitting late into the night, stitching carefully as if each thread was mending something inside him. When he handed it back to her the next morning, her smile broke through the cold walls he had built around his heart. As months passed, the change in Jonathan became impossible to ignore. He began mentoring children from disadvantaged backgrounds, opened his boardroom to voices he once dismissed, and publicly acknowledged the failures of his own company's past. The media struggled to reconcile the men he had been with the men he was becoming, but Jonathan no longer cared about perception. He cared about impact. He cared about the quiet corners where pain hid, waiting to be seen. Ruth watched her daughter flourish, her laughter filling rooms that once echoed with emptiness. Clara grew confident, curious, and unafraid to exist, her broken toy now a symbol not of loss, but of healing. And Jonathan, the millionaire CEO who once believed strength meant solitude, learned that true power came from vulnerability, from kneeling down to meet someone where they were hurting. As this story draws close, if it has touched something deep within you, if it reminded you that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps keep these stories alive.